this research. Oh, okay. So I wanted to tell you what inspired me to do this research. I noticed a couple of years ago and even last year that hijabi influencers, and I use the word influencers because they have a large following that look up to them. These influencers removed their hijab, and it was sort of like a domino effect. So it just kept happening. At some point, we were no longer surprised when one of them would remove her hijab. It was just expected. So that's where my curiosity began. Just how influential is social media on youth? And I wanted to answer that question. And since I'm a researcher, that's what I'm doing now with the help of Iman, of course. And that's why we have two surveys. We're mainly looking to answer the question of how social media influences young Muslims, because we're in a Muslim country and we're Muslim ourselves. And there's a huge Muslim community on social media that includes content creators and viewers. But it's also useful to compare results with non-Muslims and see if there are any commonalities or differences.
Yeah, and so for me, I was also very concerned with the way that Muslims were seen as influencers online, and what did that mean? But also, my research came from a different area. My interest in this research came from a different area, particularly Islam in times of crisis. So last summer, I wrote up a research proposal for my university, and then later submitted that to Bayan's advisor, Dr. Ervin Tak, and together we worked on looking at how Islam provides comfort, spiritual, emotional, and physical comfort to Muslims around the world during times of crisis, specifically during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially how Muslims are using social media, as well as other religious believers, not only Muslims, of course. How are they using social media to get through this crisis? You saw all of those prayers that were shared on WhatsApp groups, all of those articles that were produced about how to handle COVID-19 as a Muslim, as a Christian, or as a Jew, or a person of a complete different faith. And that was what was interesting to me, and eventually that led to working with Bayan on this research. And I know someone in the chat said you don't present yourself as Muslim, just a normal person on social media. And yeah, there's such a range of people who interact on social media, and that's completely normal. That's what we expect. We don't expect everyone to be the same person, We want you all to share different perspectives that are very diverse. And for us, we wanted to see how diverse are Muslims specifically, but also we submitted this other survey because how diverse are other religious believers as well, even if you don't identify as a religious believer. How different are you from the people that we're used to, right? The community that we're always talking to. And so all of this led to the hashtag Islam Gen Z conference, which we held in late January of this year. And we had several amazing speakers. So we had one, Dr. Heidi Campbell, a speaker from Texas A&M University. She's a memeologist, as she puts it herself. She studies memes, specifically how they relate to religion. And then we also had Mrs. Amal Qasir, a TED Talk poet. She's very famous. If you haven't heard her TED Talk, I highly recommend you go and watch it. So she joined us for this conference as well. And of course, Dr. Craig Considine, a very famous Twitter personality specifically. He is Christian, but he talks a lot about Islam, has a beautiful way of portraying Islam and portraying how Muslims and Christians should just get along. And perhaps our most famous guest was Dr. Khaled Baidoun, a professor of law in the United States who stands up against Islamophobia and is always bringing up discussions about how social media should be used to fight Islamophobia and to stand for Muslims all around the world. And these speakers were incredible. They talked to us about how Muslims use social media, how can we work towards embracing a more positive image of Islam, even though many of our speakers were not Muslim. If you noticed, half of our speakers were not Muslim, but they still provided incredible insight. And now I'll pass it on to Bayan to talk about some of the research that we've done so far.
Yeah, so we started off before the digital and technological world ever began with religion. Influential people back in the days, like prophets and their companions and followers, would give sermons or lectures in person. Then we moved to a more tech world where we hear those sermons on broadcast radio or television, and we hear even worldwide news on there. Then the internet came along and we started to research religious content on there. So I'm sure you've heard of the term Sheikh Google or Imam hashtag for in the Muslim context. I'm not sure in other religions if there are any terms like that, but this is where people literally would just look up questions online and watch a video or read an article. And for Muslims, that's something like Islam Web. And then finally, we've moved to our current mode of content exchange, which is social media, where we follow people and pages that post religious content, and we even get our news from there now. So far, we found that there are 3 ways that Muslims use social media. And I'm sure it applies the same way with other religions, but for the sake of our research, since we did it on Muslims specifically, those are the 3 ways that we found. And I believe that, you know, of course, with each one of those aspects, there are pros and cons. But in social media in general, there are positive things and negative things. It's sort of like a double-edged sword. So just to take you through each one of them, for information, for example, Iman, next slide. Okay, so for information, for example, the pros would be that you can find information online instantaneously, like right away. Whenever you search for something, it's there. And it's more relatable, since things that are content that tends to be online tends to be more targeted towards youth, and it's accessible to anyone everywhere in the world. But the dangers are that some scholars said that is some content online that may sort of like lead the Muslim community astray, or things that sort of like mess with or play with our core values, you know? And the other thing, obviously, is that you can't trust everything you see online. And then with community, the with dawah. Okay, so dawah is basically preaching. It means to preach, to spread the message of your religion. So in terms of pros, there is a much wider reach. You can reach people all over the globe. And in terms of the dangers, some scholars said that there's a danger of riya. So riya basically means showing off one's piety. So, you know, like if you're online and you're talking about how Islam is, and you seem like you're an amazing Muslim, your intention may not be to actually show that Islam is a good religion and everything. Your intention might be to just make people believe that you're such an amazing person, you know? So the intention might not be pure, which is a danger. And then finally, the third way that people use social media is community. So they use it to sort of feel like they belong in a community. You know, like we said in the beginning, there's a huge Muslim community online, and I'm sure there are other, you know, if you belong to other religious communities, it's the same for them. And you can also use it to defend your religion. So when all these Islamophobia attacks or whatever happen around the world, you know, you use social media to defend Islam and Muslims. Just like what happened a few days ago, unfortunately, in Canada, where that Muslim family was run over by that Islamophobic terrorist, you know. So we use online to sort of raise awareness about Islamophobia. And you can also use it to show the world that people from your religion are normal people, you know. So specifically in this case of Islam, people think that we're like these oppressed, like women, for example, that we're oppressed, but we use on like social media to show the world that, like, no, we're living our life normally, we're happy, we're normal. I don't know what you're talking about. And then finally, the dangers of this sort of like community feel is cyberbullying. So I'm sure you've heard of the term haram police in the Muslim context, where if someone doesn't agree with someone else's religious post or whatever, they think that, you know, for example, one girl, like the case of the influencers who removed their hijab, they got a lot of hate comments, you know, a lot of people saying you're going to burn in hell, you're disgusting, you're blah blah blah. And it's just like a lot of cyberbullying, which is not good, obviously. And then I will leave it to Iman to give you a few examples to demonstrate.
Yeah. But right before I do that, I want to take the question from Iman. You've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead. What's your question?
I would just want to say, first of all, this is amazing. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Iman. I have seen that usually many Muslims follow many other Muslim bloggers on many platforms. But it often happens that, like many hijabis, they change. They change from what they were to, they remove hijab, they change into a completely different person. Wouldn't that affect youth?
Yeah, so that's what we wanted to, part of what we wanted to look at within our research is what are the consequences of the actions that people do on social media. And also, we don't want you guys to focus on, you know, the hijabi influencers taking off their hijab. That's just one example. One example of concern to the two of us is hijabis. But also there are many people who make that decision on their own, right? And that is completely up to them. We're not here to judge. We're just saying that we want to see how does the world react? And like Bayan was saying, they get a lot of hate. Are in no support of hate whatsoever, and no support of violence whatsoever either. We are not in the position to judge other people. But what we want to see is what is the domino effect of the actions that people do. And just like Iman was saying, a very good point, things that happen on social media often have a very strong effect on ourselves, our consciousness, and especially the youth. So how can we make sure that that effect is positive as opposed to negative? If someone does something you don't agree with on social media, what can you do to make sure you're not negatively influenced by it? Or if there's someone who you don't agree with, how can you engage with them in a way that's respectful and polite, right? And there's a lot of messages on the chat, and I really appreciate the engagement that you guys have. Hopefully we'll be able to touch a little bit more on what you guys are saying, but I just think it's great to see that how conscious you guys are of the effects of social media. But also it's not all bad, right? There's so much good that comes from social media, like a lot of you were saying, just learning about each other's religions. If I'm Muslim, I learn a lot about Christianity through social media, through my friends who are Christian and share about it. And they do the same with Islam. If I portray Islam in a way that they want to be educated about it, that's what I'm looking for with my social media interaction. I'm going to take you really quick through a few examples to demonstrate a few examples of some of the things that we've seen on social media that show some of the ways that Bayan was talking about that Muslims use social media. So one of them, the most tragic and the most recent, was the Islamophobic hate crime against a family in Canada, which killed 4 of them, leaving only a 9-year-old child. And as tragic as this event is, truly may Allah have mercy on the souls of those who have passed. How tragic this is what we've also seen is the amount of growing support for people all over the world, Muslim and non-Muslim, for this family, for this 9-year-old child who has lost the rest of his family, as well as an understanding that we have to combat Islamophobia, whether it's in person or in the media, right? We have to make sure that we're more conscious of how we're engaging with people. And if this hurts you, learning how to make that prayer. How do you pray for the peace of those who have been hurt by this? How do you make sure that the world is a kinder place through your social media use? And then there's also the example, this is posted again by one of our guests from the Islam Gen Z conference, Dr. Khaled Baidoun. He talks about a French Algerian imam who from 1939 to 45 offered false passports to the Jewish people who were escaping the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. And he talks about the interreligious appreciation and protection that people are offered. I wouldn't have learned about this if it wasn't for social media. So there's a strength, there's a power to the information that we share, as long as we decide to engage in a way that is positive, in a way that is respectful as well. Also, a lot of Muslim anti-racial coalitions and organizations have been able to find a platform on social media, such as Muslim ARC, who shared a post about how Black Lives Matter regeneralized Black Palestinian solidarity. Black people in general, whether or not they're Muslim, working towards Palestinian solidarity and freedom and liberation in Palestine against the occupation. And then there's also the more educated perspective. Something that was posted very recently from a page on Instagram called Muslim Educators Collective was sharing an educational post about Islamic history, the deep-rooted and deep-seated history and founding of education, specifically graduation. So it even talks about like the hat, the cap and hat, and the gown that you wear for graduation, how all of those have their own history. Rooted in Islamic and Muslim civilization. So it's very interesting to learn. I wouldn't have known this if it wasn't for social media, but we have to interact in a way where we decide that this is positive. This is something I want to share. And this is only, of course, a very small drop in an ocean of knowledge. You've got Muslims and religious believers from all over the world who share their stories, who fight injustices against oppressed people like Palestinians, Uyghurs, and Rohingya Muslims, and educating the world about the beauty of their religion, whether that's Islam, Christianity, Judaism, whatever it might be, or even the beauty of your beliefs, even if you don't think you necessarily do have a religious system. And why is all of this? Why is all of this important? It's important because we live in an increasingly globalized world where communication travels very quickly, where we become educated very quickly, but also where misinformation is shared very quickly. We have to learn how to how to fight against the fake news, so to speak. And we all have a part to play in keeping the internet honest. So we have a list of do's and don'ts, things that you can do to make sure that you engage more mindfully and respectfully on social media. So do fact check, do keep in mind that there's a history, there's a story behind all the posts, that no matter how perfect everyone looks on social media, it might not always be the case. So don't judge, Do use social media responsibly and be mindful of your reposts. And do not compromise on your beliefs. If you have strong religious beliefs, don't think that you have to put them aside so that you can make someone else feel comfortable. Just learn how to defend yourself in a way that is respectful. Do not believe everything you see on social media. Like I said, it's a place for perfectionism. And so that's not always the case. Don't let it bring down your self-esteem. And of course, don't leave hateful comments on posts. Be kind everywhere that you go, on social media or off social media. Engage in ways that people can respect you and learn from you, as opposed to ways that they feel hurt by you. You don't want to be the person who becomes their enemy, right? Even though they've never met you. So be kind, no matter where you are, on and off of social media.
So just the last couple of points, I guess, I wanted to share a quote, which is, we don't have a choice on whether we do social media. The question is how well we do it. So social media is a powerful tool, and we as youth shouldn't let social media control us. We should control it. In a general sense, we can see that people mostly post their best side on social media, and that leads to things like depression. So if something as simple as this could cause that kind of damage, imagine what kind of influence social media can have on our core values, especially with regards to religion. So we need to understand how we're using social media and how it affects us in order to put the power in our hands and not the other way around. So last slide, guys, we promise. The last thing we're going to say is, just to give you a real life example of how we've been using social media. So for me personally, I have on my page, my Instagram page, I usually post videos about, things that people in my own community, like Muslims or Arabs, are doing wrong that I would like them to fix. So I would say, okay, here's what you're doing wrong, and here's how you need to fix it, or you need to handle it. And I also post a lot about Palestine, since I'm Palestinian, to raise awareness about Palestine. So those are the ways that I'm trying to use social media to help people become better, or to make the world a better place. And now Iman's going to tell you how she's using social media as well. And of course, you guys can follow us if you have any more questions in case we don't have time. And yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, please do, especially Bayan's page. As you can see, she has a lot more followers than we do here on the left. But she's doing incredible things, sharing really great content. And we're trying to imitate something of the same. And I say we because I recently co-founded I've not really social media platform / podcast called Inheriting Islam. As of last August, we're going on a year. We're almost a year old. Isn't that adorable? And we talk about what we do is we interview Muslims. Bayan was one of them, actually, one of our earliest interviewees. And we interview Muslims about what they're doing with the Islam that they've inherited. How are they trying to change the negative media perspective of Muslims? And again, this is not something only Muslims are doing. This is something that's being done all over the world by different religious groups of people, and even non-religious groups of people who just want to be kind, like I was saying, right? Who want to change the way that we're also negative on social media. So yeah, please do share and follow. And if you guys are interested, always feel free to message us. And we'd love to hear your feedback, love to hear more about what you guys think about our own pages and how we're engaging positively or trying to engage positively with social media.
Thank
you so much.
Ms. Iman and Ismail for that amazing panel session. With that, Iman and I will be handing it over to Sebastian and myself for the next session.
Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Ms.